In the Newsroom is a production in partnership with Studio Stillwater. Every week, journalists from the Stillwater News Press invite listeners to join us in the newsroom and hear the story behind the stories. Hi, and welcome to the Newsroom. I'm Beau Simmons, editor of the Stillwater News Press. Joining me today is Tanner Hullaber. I kind of messed up your name.
Yeah, you sure did.
A little bit.
Hullabaloo.
But hey, how's it going, everybody?
Yeah. Michelle Charles.
Hey.
And Ashlynd Huffman.
Hello.
Who's ordering shorts.
She's really worried that these workout shorts are going to sell out before the podcast is over.
I don't have my credit card.
Oh.
It's a problem.
Sometimes. That's life, right?
It is.
That's being an adult. And rather than saying, sorry, work, I got fun stuff to do, you say, sorry, fun stuff, I've got work to do.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the hardest parts of being an adult, really.
So what happened last week, which is this week to us, but we'll say last week, one of our, bigger story, but probably more exciting is Ashland went out on what was reported as a shots fired and a potential suspect spotted. Now, there's a reason we're real careful with those words, which we'll explain in a minute, but we heard the call on the radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you remember of the first report that came in?
It just came in as a shots fired call, which those come on all the time, honestly. And so I was going to listen to it a little bit before I jumped out, because every time I jump out on shots fired, it's nothing. It's usually just like a transformer blew or someone thought they heard a gun and it wasn't a gun. But this time I was like, Beau's like, go. And so I had him listen to the scanner because I actually lost my car scanner. So Beau was listening to the scanner in the newsroom, and I was driving to the area where the individual was spotted. And I was behind a whole bunch of police cars, so I was just kind of following them anyways. And it happened so fast. I grabbed my camera, and they already had him on the ground. And, when I showed up, they didn't have their guns drawn on him, but they had him on the ground, face on the ground, and then were trying to put handcuffs on him.
And I would say the reason you went on the call is because they were describing someone and their direction of travel.
Yeah, they were describing someone.
A lot of times these things can be something else. I mean, sometimes these things are people shooting guns. They're just out in the woods, shooting guns and tannerite and just,
yeah, and
that kind of stuff.
Because they had someone that they spotted. And this was
downtown. Yeah.
And, the person that they described the person, and I was like, oh, okay, well, Beau was still listening to the scanner, and once they got the individual in the police car, I went to the apartment complex to find out more information because officers on that scene did not have any information. And so I went to the apartment complex to see if there were any witnesses outside that heard anything, anyone that called 911, and kind of just waited.
Yeah, that's where they thought at least one of the calls originated.
Yeah. I actually spoke to that lady, the initial 911 call. But she said she thought it was a gunshot, but she said it was kind of loud and kind of faint. So she didn't know the exact direction it came from.
Loud but faint.
How does that work? What did she mean by that?
I do not know.
I wonder if she meant that it sounded like it could have been something from far off. It was so loud, but she was still able to hear it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think when you hear loud but faint. Like it was far away, but it was loud enough that it was still a pretty loud sound to where you heard it, but it still sounds kind of odd when you're talking about a gunshot, because then the further you are away from it, the less likely you are to report where they are with it, I guess.
It seems like it could be anywhere,
right.
then. It doesn't seem like you would,
So,
peg the apartment complex as the location for it then.
Well, I guess that's sort of the originating area of the call, so that's where they first canvassed, and then they tried to follow this person's method and direction of travel, so they just sort of tracked back there. But these things develop, don't they? We did put out a breaking story about the call that 911 got and the apprehension.
Yeah, we received a little bit
of
information on scene while we were at the apartments. Captain Royce Stevens with the Stillwater Police Department had a little bit of information, not much. At that time, they were looking for a weapon of some sort. I asked, do you know what color, what kind of gun, anything, and they had no idea. And so at that point, officers were just looking in dumpsters and tall grass, anywhere that they could look where a gun could be underneath of cars. And by that time, the apartment began to get pretty crowded. People were showing up asking, hey, what's happening? What's going on? And so eventually I just left because there was no developing. And then later on, we found out that the individual was not arrested, was not detained anymore, nothing. And that it was just under investigation at that time.
So, Ashlynd, I have a question. The fact that they were looking for a gun makes it sound like the person that they detained did not have a gun on him.
Oh, yes. He did not have any gun on him at all.
Okay.
He didn't have any weapon.
So why did they detain him?
Just because he matched the description. The press release I got from Kyle Bruce said that he was acting suspicious. The individual was acting suspicious. And he matched the description. So.
Well, see, that's why... Another thing they told you on scene was they had at least another witness who claimed they thought this person was putting a gun in his or her waistband.
On their waistband.
Right, yeah.
And he didn't have a gun. So at that point, they were like, where's the gun? We need to find the gun. That's what we need. And a day later, I checked on it, and it was no longer under investigation. There was no gun found. There was no scene found. There was no additional witnesses. There wasn't even a suspect. They actually have no idea if it was even a gun.
Not witnesses to an incident, but witnesses who at least told us that this was someone on their way to work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually got 2 phone calls in the newsroom. Now, you took one of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what did that person tell you?
He actually asked if we could take the photos down, and I explained to him we are making sure that we're not using words like he was arrested, a suspect, anything like that. As of now, this case is under investigation. I told him I chose the photos strategically, that it wouldn't show his face, just because if he didn't actually do something that he was being detained for, we don't want to just blast his face out there. And so he said, okay, I understand. And I called him back the next day when I found out it was no longer under investigation, and I simply asked him if he and his friend wanted to come in and talk.
But it's a story that developed in kind of a weird way. It could have gone one way, went the opposite. But it also is sort of a lesson to why we're so cautious. So many people think especially when we do crime stories and things like that, why don't you just come out and call that person a rapist, or call them, it's like... we're trying to, this is legal cover, that's what we concern ourselves with. These aren't stylistic choices. These aren't the kind of choices we make, based on anything other than we owe legal cover to ourselves. No, we can't treat people like they're criminals,
Right, and it's kind of like you never want to convict anybody in a headline or in a story, so as much as you can use, allegedly or reportedly, you have to give that kind of statement a source. You can't just, so that it's not us just saying it or just suggesting that that's the case, so it's kind of one of those, the fine line that we have to tiptoe sometimes, in terms of trying to be right down the middle and not try to let it go either one way.
Well, and innocent until proven guilty is kind of the foundation of our legal system.
Exactly.
So because someone was questioned by the police, because someone was detained by the police, even being arrested, doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty of anything. So you can't just brand someone as being guilty of whatever crime it is. It could either be, you could be a dude trying to walk to work who just matches a description. Or you could be someone who, there can be so many things that can happen, right? But the fact is, until you're convicted in a court of law, you are innocent. And we do have to keep that in mind at all times.
Yeah, these people haven't even begun their process.
Not at all.
And, the system, the court system hasn't even started for them yet, so...
Yeah, so there's a big responsibility. That's one of the things. We always have to remember that we're writing about people's lives. The things we put out have the ability to damage someone's reputation, someone's career, someone's relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big responsibility. We have to take that really seriously. And at the same time, we don't want to cover up bad things that are going on. I think sometimes people think we're either doing one or the other. We're either being irresponsible or we're covering things up. And the fact is, it's neither. We work really hard to be fair and to be accurate about that. But it's a big responsibility, and we take it seriously.
Right, and sometimes you're kind of dealing with, I don't want to say like a lack of information, but there's only so much that you can really find out, in any one thing. I mean, I remember that there was a shooting that happened about 10:30, in terms of when we heard the call go over the scanner. And, our crime writer at the time went out, got, some photos, got a little bit of information at least about what happened, but we didn't know the full extent of the story in terms of that first amount of information we put out, so it might sometimes seem like we didn't do very much on it or we didn't talk to enough people or something. But sometimes there really is just sort of, only so many things that we can actually say, because either that's as much as we were given or we can't confirm or deny other things, so that we just can't include that in the story. So
another point to that is sometimes you're only dealing with the police narrative or the arresting official's narrative, and you're not going to be able to talk to the defendant because they have lawyers. They're not gonna, they're not gonna let you do that. So it can be like that way. It can be that way for months,
Sure. And breaking news is by definition an evolving situation. Mm-hmm. We're going to gradually get information as time progresses. So, I mean, you don't know everything at the beginning, and sometimes things that people think at the beginning turn out to be wrong. I mean, we had people on social media saying it was a bank robbery.
Oh, right.
They
because
caught a bank robber.
He was apprehended in front of Chase Bank, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can't always believe things that you see on social media. Sometimes Facebook does help me out with things, but sometimes it does more harm than good when it's misinformation. And with stuff like this, there was a hit and run I covered last year, and that was under investigation for over a month. And I had checked weekly on it and didn't have an update. And then sometimes there's things like this where I check the next day and it's no longer under investigation. So breaking news, you never know how long it's going to be under investigation or how long it's going to take to get the answers that you need. And so when you have people posting on social media, it kind of blocks the truth. There's just, and it happens all the time, every time I'm on breaking news. And I usually talk to law enforcement on scene. I'm like, hey, this is what's being said on Facebook. Y'all need to get something out on your Facebook saying something, to kind of mitigate the misinformation. But this time, did not have time to even check Facebook. So
that's one thing that I notice. I mean, do you notice this too, Tanner? How much time we spend debunking rumors sometimes,
right?
Or
Yeah,
falsehoods?
I was just about to say, the homecoming wreck. Remember how that day, the initial report was that she was intoxicated. That she had been at work and then left work, and then
first people thought it was an explosion.
Right?
They were saying terrorism.
There were all kinds of things. And then I remember I think it was Freddy Pauls. One of the managers there had called and basically told us that the situation that we had heard regarding her, having been at work and then left looking really somber, and then her leaving, that hadn't really happened that way. So I remember David Bitton, a former reporter of ours, was able to, kind of rearrange his story. And then so we put out a new story based on the new information that we had heard. So, it's kind of another one of those things where, you might not know the full story, but you still kind of have to put something out because, and it was related to that story, but it was sort of like it might sort of change even after that initial breaking news.
Sure, and we should say that actually it wasn't Freddy Pauls. It was another restaurant that has a similar name.
Right.
So talk. This manager of this exact restaurant.
Yeah. No. Exactly. But, I mean, that was a weird thing.
It has been 6 years.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. But, that was a weird thing, too, because there were so many stories going around and there was just so much chaos. I mean, breaking news is weird. It's really weird. You want to get as much information out as you can so people know what's going on, because people see things and they get scared or they get excited about it. But then at the same time, you have to be so careful what you put out.
Right. I mean, I don't think there's an option to not cover something that is such a public event. Right?
Absolutely. When people see somebody face down on the sidewalk and there are police with their long rifles standing around him, they take notice. And they assume that person did something wrong.
This kind of reminded me of one of the first things I actually covered at the news press. There was a warrant being served in town somewhere, and a transformer blew. And they actually thought that someone inside the house was shooting at the officers. Do y'all remember that?
A little bit.
Michelle and I went out there, and this was when I first started, and Michelle gave me gloves and was like, yeah, it's cold, that you need to do this. And she started talking to people, and I was taking pictures, but it ended up being nothing but a transformer blew.
There wasn't anyone in the house, right?
No, there wasn't even anybody in the house. There was a cat, but that was it.
Remember that cat sitting there staring out the window at us?
It was so cute. I got pictures. But yeah, I mean, it's like in the moment you think the worst is happening, but as things develop, you learn more. So in that moment, things are very tense, and law enforcement are very guarded, and they don't give information as quickly as when things calm down a bit and they have a moment to breathe, I guess.
Now, I also want to note that on that scene, the police were still around. They were still, I mean, you could tell they'd kind of stood down. They weren't on high alert, but they were still around there, and they still kind of had the scene blocked off a little bit. I saw someone and I was like, hey, when are we going to be able to get close enough to take photos? And I look around and I'm like, Ashlynd, and I
already
look over,
on scene.
and she's already like managed to work her way past their perimeter and is hiding behind a tree in someone's front yard taking photos.
I have a
of the
method.
house.
If you walk slow and you watch the ground, like you don't make any sound, you walk very slow and you hide behind the trees, you can get very close.
That works if you're small.
Every time. It literally. And now I just run up there and they're like, hi, Ashland. I'm like, where can I go?
Sounds like you're stalking, like hunting.
Little bit.
Have to. You have to be quiet.
Going through the woods.
Take the pictures,
silently.
back up later.
So I think the real question is, how do we protect these transformers?
Boy, they need some protection, don't they?
Do we need to put some other kind of wire around them to keep the squirrels out or what? I don't know.
The city's actually working on replacing a bunch of transformers, which will hopefully increase system reliability. I don't know if the old ones have a bad design that just makes them blow up, but we do know suicidal squirrels do a lot of damage.
A lot of problems come from those blown transformers.
Yeah. Yeah, kamikaze squirrels are taking out transformers left and right. Anyway.
Right.
So how do we segue from that?
We just do.
Okay.
We just push past.
Okay, we're just going to take a hard left.
Breaking into crime scenes and
hiding behind trees.
Yeah. You just say, what else is going on in the city?
Well, something that I would like to talk about is rental assistance. The city council this week got an update. Everyone in the city government that I've talked to has been very concerned about the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's obviously an ongoing concern, right? And we've got, we had a program that was put into effect in December. The city took $150,000 of its CARES Act funding and put it toward rental, mortgage, and utility assistance for people who are behind on their bills.
Right. This was the first CARES Act.
Exactly.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, this was phase one of the assistance program that the city has developed for this. They worked with Our Daily Bread. They viewed it as being extraordinarily successful. Within I think 2 weeks, all the money was gone. They put a $1,500 limit per household on the amount of assistance you could get, but they didn't have any income limits because at that point they had people who had never asked for assistance before, who were being furloughed, who couldn't cover their rent or their mortgages, and that was another thing that they included, which you don't usually see. They wanted to go into a phase two, and the federal government announced that it was giving money out through the Community Development Block Grant Program. CDBG funding is designed to help low and moderate income residents. And a lot of times they're used for infrastructure, like they might replace a big sewer line in like a working class neighborhood, something like that. In this case, there's money set aside for COVID assistance. The city of Stillwater wanted to use this to fund phase two of this rental and utility assistance. They knew that because, as they said during the meeting, free money always comes with strings. And federal money probably comes with more strings than most other things. They knew there would be income limits because you have to be low or moderate income because it's CDBG, right? What they didn't know was that there would be all these other things that you would have to fill out, all these other hoops that you would have to jump through. They found out that there is additional documentation required of the applicants.
Yeah, this isn't just dumping money from one thing to another. These are an actual federal grant.
Exactly. Yeah. And they can't include it. I mean, they can't just continue it and roll right into phase 2 the way they thought they'd be able to. So their original partner, Our Daily Bread, now has to compete against at least 2 other agencies in a request for proposal process that outlines the program. Now, obviously, I think ODB is going to have a little bit of an advantage because they already ran the first program and they kind of know how it works and they've got a little infrastructure. But they have to compete for that now because they can get up to 6% of the total amount of the grant for administrative costs to cover their costs. In addition, the applicants have to get their landlord has to fill out a form about the amount of their rent. And then they have to have another form that certifies that the rent is fair market value, that it's not elevated. And if they pay rent if they pay expenses that cover more than 100 days, then there has to be a lead-based paint test, which I don't even understand that. I don't even understand why that's tied to it. But anyway, there's all of this red tape that is going along with this. And what this has done now, we had the original program that expired in January. This one, the application was due in February, and they had anticipated being able to start it like in April. And now it's pushed it till at least June before they'll even be able to get the money. And our
eviction moratoriums are running out, right?
Well, the eviction moratorium's just been overthrown.
Yeah.
I mean, by the courts. So what does this mean? This means I need to look at eviction filings is what it means and see if people are actually losing their homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a story I wrote. This was a long time ago when I worked down in Perkins, and the city of Perkins got federal money to build a new wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, I think that's before my time.
Well, yeah. But this story actually wound up included in Tom Coburn's federal fumbles waste report that he used to put out every year. Because I wrote a story about the fact that since they got this federal money, it actually came with all these requirements that drove up the cost of the project so much that the city didn't wind up benefiting from getting the funding at all. So, I mean, these are the things that can happen when you're working with the federal government and you're getting money.
Sounds like a scam.
That's what a lot of people felt like at the time. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure for Dr. Coburn it was, yeah.
Yes, Dr. Coburn definitely had a point of view.
A lot of those. And Tanner, what's going on? We know you're working. You're working at looking at what's coming back, right? Or
yeah, I mean, because I've just kind of had this sense that I'm sure a lot of people feel this way too. Is that last year sort of just kind of was lost, or it's kind of like, the pandemic hits in March, and then before you knew it, it was June, and then before you knew it, it was, holiday time, and then
killed our summer a little bit,
right?
I don't know, some people could still travel,
right? I mean, some people were still traveling, but just stuff like concerts and all this stuff just wasn't happening, right. So it was just, I've just kind of been thinking that it seems like stuff's coming back. Stuff is, it almost feels like summer will be more of a normal summer this year. I feel like, people can probably plan more of a trip, can probably plan more of, doing things. I mean, stuff even just like the city pool being open again, just small things like that people take for, maybe took for granted every summer. It's all that's coming back, so hopefully that means that all these things will see a lot more people go into them, a lot more people at the Y, a lot more people at the city pool, taking advantage of these types of things that they weren't able to do last year.
Do you think anyone here would consider the digital vaccine passport to have them get into their events?
Ooh.
I kind of look at it as, I know it freaks people out,
right.
They don't, but I would think if you are a private event space, then you can do something like that. And I don't know. And it seems more like, to me, it more incentivizes maybe. That's incentive to get a vaccine. you get into this exclusive party. I don't know.
Kind of like the shot in a beer approach. No, because we were talking about that, these promotions. There was someone calling for our local brewery, Iron Monk, to, implement something like this, because there are places in the country that are doing a shot in a beer promotion where basically if you get your COVID vaccine, they'll give you a free beer. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, go where people want to be and then vaccinate them while they're there, sort of like what the health department did at Calf Fry, which, by the way, we still need to follow up on.
We still need to see what kind of numbers they did at Calf Fry.
But I agree with Tanner. I mean, it feels like summer's finally here. I mean, I remember like during the whole lockdown, Beau talking about, almost feeling like he was in a fugue state at certain points where you're just
Did you guys not just space out sometimes?
Yeah.
Or like you have this weird passage of time where you look up and you're like, wow, 3 hours have gone by. That didn't happen to anyone else.
Every day of my life. I didn't know what time it was, what day it was. I didn't know anything.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was the first time I've ever had like a 3-day weekend and been kind of bored of being at home by like the Sunday afternoon, being kind of like ready to come back to work. Like that was, thankfully I didn't have to, I only had a handful of days that I worked from home last year, but
I do not like working from home.
Yeah, so I was happy to be here at times, but there was also nobody else to answer the phone or answer questions about all this other stuff going on. So it wasn't fun being here either.
Oh, yeah, just Tanner sitting in an empty building, building the paper.
I mean, I always think, though, we were very fortunate to be considered essential to have our jobs every day.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, we were very lucky in that respect that we got to come to work,
Right, even though it may have changed exactly how we did, we've always done phone interviews, things over, maybe over email occasionally, but that being the norm has kind of been sort of an odd thing to get used to, Thankfully now we're starting to meet with people more in person and stuff, and that's just, I guess you just adapt with how you have to, right? So I mean, that's just another thing we can look forward to, is actually being able to shake somebody's hand when you go interview them, and maybe not have to, as Ashlynd shakes her head.
Do not shake my hand.
See, I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to even all those events that you cover over and over and over again, because I do so much community news, and stuff. I mean, I'm looking forward to going and taking pictures of the pie ladies at the Payne County Fair this year. There were so many times when I sat there and thought, oh no, it's time to go take pictures of the pie ladies again, because it just felt like we did the same thing over and over and over again every year. And I'm looking forward to all of that mundane stuff. I really am. I'm excited about it. I want to get out. I want to take photos of people. I want to go to events. I actually am excited about this.
Yeah, we lost, April was always a big event time, and we lost a lot of those April events that we used to have. Even this year, our event calendar used to be packed. We still didn't have our the arts festival and things like that. And I had mentioned Blazathon before, but they are going to have Blazathon 2.0 or something in September. So
congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. It's just not hooked up to the Kansas City barbecue competition.
So it won't be a qualifier?
So it's not a qualifier anymore. So it's a local barbecue competition and fundraiser.
Okay.
So
all right.
Terrific.
Well, maybe next year.
Yeah.
They'll bring it back.
This personal thing that I enjoy will be a highlight for us all to end on.
It will be.
You guys.
As it should be, right? Because it's all about Beau.
That's right. That's right. Okay, I think that's going to do it. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom. Look for Studio Stillwater wherever you find your podcasts. Find archived episodes on stwnewspress.com.